The art of fight. It took me a bit to come up with this name because art and fight are usually not used in the same sentence. But if you really understand the art behind relationships, the art of fight is one of the most important things that will pop up. I've taken masterclasses on this topic, I've given TED Talks on this topic, I've talked about this topic numerous times, and today I want to share the art of fight, 3 C's with you. What do the 3 C's stand for? Control, convert, and communicate. Now, before I get to the 3 C's, I want to give you a little segue into why is it important to learn the art of fight. Me and my best friend, we have been really good friends for the past 10 years. Now, one of the most interesting things about us is that we are very similar as people. In fact, like in the last 10 years, I think we've only fought twice. And up until this one time, me and my best friend, we were on FaceTime, and suddenly the doorbell rings, and I open the door. At the door, there is my childhood school friend. I haven't seen her in like probably 2 years. I'm so shocked by her just like giving me a surprise like that I accidentally cut the call. We have some dinner, we have a good time and chat, and she leaves. I call back my best friend and no answer, nothing. Okay, I call him again, no answer, nothing again. I'm like, okay, let me just give him a text. So I drop him a text, nothing to that as well. Now I know something is seriously wrong. So I let it go for that evening. The next morning, I call him back. So it was almost as if he was waiting for me to ask, and I asked him, so what's wrong? Why are you acting weird? And he just like it opens a dam of yelling and just like name calling. He's like, how could you just cut the call on my face? What do I look like to you? How could you, be so insensitive? You didn't even give me a warning just because your friend showed up and da 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 da. And in all that while, I'm thinking, really, over an accidental hang up. It seemed very small at the moment for me. And we just like get so sick of each other. We hang up and no calls, no texts for the next whole week. So now 1 week passes by and I decide to call him back up again. I called him with the intent to understand, and he picks up and I ask him, so what hurt you the most? Why were you so offended at something so small? And then he says that I'm so used to being a priority in your life that when you cut the call on my face without even giving me a warning, right? And especially just because another friend showed up, I felt so small that I almost felt like I didn't even matter to you. And that's when it hit me. The very reason that I felt so comfortable cutting the call is because he has always felt like family to me. And in my world, we don't explain to family, right? You take liberties with family. So I realized that day, one thing, that what felt like neglect to him was actually coming out of a place of love from me. We live in separate realities, right? What might be looking like a 6 to you is looking like a 9 to me. Most people avoid fights because we think that fights are bad for our relationships, when in reality, fights are not bad for our relationships. Fights don't damage relationships as much as the lack of repair damages relationships. There is an element of art to fighting, or there's an element of art to arguments, because whenever an argument happens or whenever a fight happens, it reveals a missing piece in your relationship. So number 1, control. Now, what do I mean by control? When I say control, controlling is an element of emotions. I think the biggest dilemma that we have whenever we are in an argument or right after an argument with somebody that we love is, what do I do with all of these emotions? Do I keep it to myself, or do I lash it out? Do I just say everything that's on my mind? Well, there are 2 elements to it. There is an inward-facing emotional regulation, and there's an outward-facing emotional regulation. Now, what do I mean by inward-facing and outward-facing? When I say inward-facing, it is the type of emotional regulation that you do within yourself, that you do with yourself. It's a self-soothing mechanism. Inward-facing control mechanisms can look like taking warm showers, taking walks, writing, journaling, physical exercise, etc. Outward-facing emotion control mechanisms can include venting to a friend, sharing it on a social media platform. I won't recommend that, but sharing somewhere on a third platform. But ideally, this is where your locus of control for your emotions is outside. Now, there are different situations where an inward-facing control mechanism or where an outward-facing control mechanism can be helpful, but it's up for you to choose on how you feel in that moment. There are situations where an outward-facing control mechanism like venting to a friend can be helpful, but in most scenarios, if you're able to come to a point where you're able to self-soothe after an argument, after a fight, there's nothing like it. I'm going to make a video soon about emotional regulation, how you can self-soothe to follow this up. Second C is convert. Now, what do I mean by convert? Converting is conversion of mindset. It's a reframe method. Now, all of us, the people that we love, ourselves, we're all living in separate realities. If I put a 6 between you and me, you're looking at a 6, I'm looking at a 9. And both are real, both are true. The ideal place in any relationship is to be able to go from separate realities to a shared reality. Which is why it's very important to understand that when somebody is lashing out at us, let's say, or we are in an argument with somebody, or somebody is fighting with us, not to take it personally. In most cases, people that we love, or most people, they are not against us, they are for themselves. And that's a big difference, because if we think that somebody is against us, we immediately go into that competitive mindset where we think that this is the enemy. It becomes a you versus me problem, which is never a good idea in a fight. But rather, when we think that they're for themselves and not against me, we are naturally going into a collaborative mindset where it's us versus the problem, which is always a much more helpful way of resolving conflicts. By the way, when I was struggling in my own closest relationships, I wish somebody gave me what I'm about to show you. I created India's first conflict resolution card game called Let's Fix It. It is a conversational tool that you can use to solve fights and conflicts with your loved ones. Relationships are like puzzles, and each fight reveals a missing piece. And most people avoid fights thinking that fights are going to damage relationships, when in reality, fights don't damage relationships. A lack of repair damages relationships. And Let's Fix It is your repair tool. It helps you create stronger bonds. It helps you solve fights and build stronger emotional bonds, and to make your relationships bulletproof. Now, Let's Fix It is available at beingbeyond.in and on Amazon. Now back to the video. Step 3 is communicate. Now, before I try to establish the point behind communicate, I want to tell you a little story. Early on in my career, when I had just started to give offline talks, I was called to talk to a set of managers in an MNC. Now, my MO, my modus operandi, is always to speak to the HR first and try to understand who my audience is, who am I speaking to, because who my audience is decides the level of information that I'm going to give and how I'm going to deliver it. And by speaking to the HR, what I found out was my audience was going to be a group of 70 to 80 managers, executive managers, all men. And naturally, the first thing that popped up in my mind was it was possible that I would be met with resistance, because here I was, a 26-year-old female, trying to teach communication to a set of already senior managers who have had 15 to 20 years of experience behind them. I was acutely aware of that possible challenge, which naturally decided the level of information that I would give this group of people, this group of participants, and the way that I would deliver it. The tone, the body language, the language, I went for a mix of Hindi and English, because that would help me connect better and make their defenses go down, if any at all. Now, why I'm telling you this story is to establish the point that whenever you're speaking to somebody, a very potent way of enhancing your receptiveness, enhancing the receptivity of your message, is to really get into the head of who you're speaking to. Try to understand who you're speaking to. What could their possible defenses be? Because if I'm aware of that, I'm able to manage it, and that makes the conversation much easier and smoother. Now, if you haven't watched the DISA personality type video, I would urge you to watch that and come back to this video after that, or I would urge you to watch that video after this, because what the DISA personality type does is help you understand yourself better, decode others better, as a result, connect better and develop stronger relationships. Because relationships are like puzzles, and like I always say, every fight reveals a missing piece. And most people avoid fights because they think it's going to damage their relationships, but in reality, fights don't damage relationships. A lack of repair damages relationships. So if we can learn the art of fight, we can fight better, we can fight well, and turn those conflicts into connection. I'll see you in the next video.